Now for our next conversation, please welcome Dr. Katharina Bumelberg, Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer, SLB, Sandhya Ganapathy, CEO, EDP Renewables, North America, Bret Kugelmass, Founder and CEO, Last Energy, Bradford Pete Hill, Executive Director, Clean Energy Solutions, Next Era Energy Resources, and moderator Chris Helman, Senior Editor, Forbes.
All right. Hi again, everybody. Very excited to have I think, the largest panel of the day here, so we're going to use all of our time. I got to tell you guys, I'm really depressed. I'm super depressed right now because when I think about the energy transition, I look at the numbers and I'm like, man, we've made so much progress, but the world is using more oil than it's ever used before. We're burning more coal than we've ever burned before, more natural gas. So I want you guys here to make me feel better about the energy transition that is underway, how we're going to capitalize on it and make it sustainable. So I want to start here with Sandhya Ganapathy, the CEO of EDP Renewables North America. You've built, Sandhya, how many gigawatts of solar and wind so far in America?
So let me try to take you away from your depressed mood.
Yes, please.
Okay, no, we are putting a lot of gigawatts into the ground, a lot of steel into the ground. But EDP Renewables, we are the 4th largest player in the world. We are present in 28 markets. And here in the US, on the onshore side, we have got 9 gigawatts. And so significant presence across 18 states. We have a distributed generation business as well, which is more of the smaller projects. Think about rooftops, carports. But we are all doing a lot.
So you've made huge progress so far. Now, Bradford, I want to ask you, how has the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed a year ago, how is that helping the industry? I know at NextEra, you're really focused on renewable solutions, lower carbon solutions. I know, like Sandhya, you probably benefit from a lot of the subsidies in the IRA. How are you seeing that in your world?
Exactly. Well, when I think about the IRA, I mean, what a time to be alive in the energy transition.
Yeah.
We at NextEra, we have about 30 gigawatts of renewables in operation. We also own Florida Power and Light, which is one of the most progressive utilities in terms of bringing renewables online. I like to think of IRA in a pre-IRA and a post-IRA world. Right?
Okay.
Pre-IRA, we had a lot of corporates who were looking at reporting mechanisms, baselining their greenhouse gas emissions, and then also reporting their 2030 and 2050 goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't quite sure how they were going to scale and get there. But now with IRA, we have a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation opportunity to achieve those goals, right? Instead of having an investment cycle of every 2 to 3 years where we were looking at we needed extensions or step-downs in renewable incentives, now we have a 10-year runway. Right? 10 years of certainty to address financial efficiency, where we're going to put capital, how we're going to develop land, and bring down the cost of renewables. It's an exciting time.
So that should be enough to, I don't know, double, triple the U.S. Renewable power supply over the next decade? What's our outlook?
Exactly. So right now we build every year about 20 to 30 gigawatts of renewables.
In the United States?
In the United States. Okay. And we're looking by 2030, in the next 10 years, we'll probably double to triple that and have more renewables online, especially when we start to bring in technologies like green hydrogen to address hard-to-abate sectors. No,
I love that. We need more everything. But I am kind of worried about a future where we have wind turbines on every ridge and solar panels in every yard. So that's why I'm so excited to have Bret Kugelmass here. He is the CEO of Last Energy. And Bret's company is developing modular nuclear reactors. You've sold a bunch of these in Eastern Europe already?
Yeah, we have an order book of 50 of our power plants spread across Europe, both Eastern and Western.
How many megawatts do they generate?
They each generate 20 megawatts. So yeah, while we've sold 50 so far, we'd probably need to sell 50,000 to make a dent in the climate issue.
You need to sell 50,000 small nuclear reactors to make how many, what kind of dent would that make?
I mean, listen, I think
how much coal would that replace?
Your initial concern is exactly correct. It's like, we're not making any progress on the real issue. No matter how many more gigawatts we add and pat ourselves on the back for, it's not making a difference. I mean, I think we need to move away from this subsidy regime that clearly doesn't allow an order of magnitude paradigm shift, which is required to make any progress whatsoever on emissions. And then we need another order of magnitude paradigm shift to handle legacy emissions if we want to make any dent on climate in general.
So we certainly need nuclear in all of its flavors, whether it's fission, like what you're doing, whether it's new fusion reactors. Now let's talk to Katarina van Bemmelburg from SLB, the company formerly known as Schlumberger. I'm not supposed to, that is a dead name to them now, I understand. But she's going to tell us how there's so many other ways that even a fossil fuel-born company like Schlumberger is now working on. Tell us what you're doing with the geothermal and the carbon capture.
Yes. So first of all, I think we have to recognize that currently still 80% of all energy that is globally used has a fossil fuel origin, 53% of that being oil and gas. And you are right, it's currently growing. And you said, you know what, it's depressing. I think I understand where you are coming from, but knowing that we are still very dependent on oil and gas, I think the number one point is we need to decarbonize oil and gas. We need to do everything to get to the lowest carbon barrel. And that includes lots of different points. The most obvious one is getting rid of methane emissions, to be honest, because half of all emissions out of oil and gas is actually methane leakage. And methane leakage and methane that is based on testing. So that's something the industry is working on heavily. So that's the oil and gas part. And other than that, I think the industry has a lot of capabilities and know-how that are used that are useful and used for the energy systems of the future, the decarbonized systems. And you said exactly the right stuff. It's geothermal and geoenergy. Then I think the one major technique that we have to get rid of carbon out of the atmosphere is carbon capture and storage. And the knowledge how to do carbon capture and storage, how to find the right reservoirs, and how to actually do it is in the oil and gas industry. And then we do hydrogen as well. We do critical minerals. So it's basically a big bunch of different topics that we address.
SLB is not just oil field services. You're
no.
doing so many other things. Now,
see, this is why we are SLB and not Schlumberger anymore, so that people recognize. Yeah.
Now, Sandhya, I'm sure that you deal with all sorts of challenges when it comes to siting and developing your power projects. Yep. One thing that I keep hearing about is the need for long-haul transmission. You know, you may generate your wind power in Kansas, but you need to get the electricity to Chicago or whatever it is. How are you dealing with that? Is it becoming harder or easier to site these transmission lines? And how might the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies help with that as well?
It's not becoming easier for sure. I think the fundamental problem is that US has an aging infrastructure, right? The transmission, the grid that we have today never was designed for this kind of demand. And so the question is, how do we sort of adjust in the near term, and what do we do in terms of long-term planning? No significant investments in the last decade. Of course, we are hearing about some of the transmission lines which recently got cleared, but after an 18-year-long process. And so definitely much needs to be done. I think all of us, NextEra is here, we are here. So all of us are doing our bit in order to sort of push, because we need to sort of have a pan-US policy. It cannot be state-based. You know, there is a problem of what happens when transmission goes from one state to another, the agencies which are involved in approving that. There is a problem with how do you get the cost allocated, the cost to build transmission, how is it allocated between customers of different states? And so there is that issue as well. And so we do have those issues. So near term, definitely we cannot solve it, because a transmission line to get approved to build, it takes years, if not decades. So that's not a near-term fix. Now then you need to start thinking about how can we do the existing infrastructure, make it more dynamic. Can you add more storage to the grid, and how does that facilitate? Can you have more hybrids into the grid? Coal plants are retiring. How do you actually convert them into renewable energy, and how we can replace the existing interconnection and existing infrastructure which is already there to use it. And so those are short-term things. Long-term, of course, we need to be taking a step back and think that we don't want to commit the same mistake that happened, many years back when we planned the grid that we have today. And so we need to sort of fundamentally have a different approach of, bringing sort of a single window clearance policy where you don't need to have to go to 17, 18, 19 different agencies for approval. Just get it all cleared in one go and have that kind of a focus. But yes, that is the single largest, when you think about the structural problem that we have in terms of deploying more renewables, that's the single largest issue that we have for sure.
Single window approval, was that the term you used?
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. I hear a lot about offshore wind. Europe, of course, has built tremendous offshore wind capability. The United States is only just getting around to that, but it's really expensive. And again, I get depressed when I think about the whales that have been washing up on the eastern seaboard that may or may not have been killed by the pile driving efforts of offshore wind development. Are you doing offshore wind?
We are doing offshore wind. So we do have offshore, not only in the US, but in other parts of the world. Here we are present in Massachusetts, in New York, we have in California. But look, fundamentally, let's accept that we are miles behind Europe when it comes to offshore. We have a lot to learn. We don't even have projects which are of scale here yet, which are up and running. And so there is a lot that the industry has to sort of evolve. And so these are growing pains. I mean, why are we singling out offshore? These are growing pains with any industry. Take any commodity. You have to go through those growing pains. To accentuate all of that, right now, it's an interesting time when we have the issue around interest rates. We have the issue around inflation. We have the issue around supply chain. All of that sort of just makes it even more dramatic, to an outsider. But the reality is also that US has some of the best resource, when you look at the coast. And it will be a shame if you're not able to convert that and if you're not able to push the electrons into the grid. So yes, we do have challenges today, but those challenges are not because offshore is not viable. The challenges is because, yes, you do have some macro challenges, and then there is a challenge of picking up and learning on the curve. And I'm sure that when a few projects are here, we will get to understand what it takes to sort of work around the US framework. I mean, we have specific regulations around maritime crew. We have specifications around building ships here. And so we need to adjust to our realities. But, the coast, both the coasts need a lot of generation. They need a lot of power. And this is a fantastic way to push those electrons.
We could spend a whole hour talking about the Jones Act and the complications that brings in. Bradford, I understand that this isn't your area of NextEra, but NextEra is not doing offshore wind?
No, so we're continuing looking at a host of new technologies and emerging technologies. We've looked at onshore wind, we've looked at SMRs. We tend to evaluate them through cost structures and operational structures, and right now we find kind of the best play for us is very much to be on onshore in terms of land development, building out renewables, siting supply next to load, right? There's also, as you mentioned, the transmission component, and we're very much focused on doing behind the meter installations as well when there's large loads that we don't have to hit the transmission grid and we can supply energy directly to the customer. I think in renewables development and in any of the businesses here, we've always had challenges, right? We've had either transmission, labor force challenges, cost of capital. But I think what the IRA adds to it is that it gives us that security. It gives that ability to make those long-term investments and make those long-term changes that we really need in the renewables to build out more of these emerging technologies to address those hard-to-abate sectors.
Absolutely. Now, Bret, do you get any of the IRA subsidies for nuclear power plants?
We're not well, I personally am philosophically opposed to subsidies in general. I think what they do is they distort product market fit and they manipulate markets for the benefit of whoever is able to lobby best for those subsidies. So I think that's not the path forward. And no, what we do is we sell purely private deals out to Europe. We don't sell into the US market. Energy is 3 times as expensive out there. So for the same product, making 3 times as much makes a lot of sense to us. And we haven't taken $1 single of government money.
When will your first one be operational?
We're targeting 2025 from a physical delivery perspective. That's not going to be a problem. These take 18 months to build in a factory setting. The problem, again, is always permitting and licensing. It's the bureaucracy that holds it back.
Now, I've seen some schematics of your plant, and we did a Forbes magazine story on your company a few months ago. But to tell the audience what happens to the waste. I mean, that has to be the big concern. This is a traditional fission-based nuclear power plant. You're going to generate some high-level waste. How do you deal with that problem?
Big misconception. Nuclear waste has never hurt a single person, place, or thing in all of human history. It's about dealing with the perception, not with the technical challenge.
So what's the technical challenge that you're dealing with for your waste?
The byproduct of spent nuclear fuel rods is an incredibly valuable resource that we want to be able to mine and harvest for all times. You create an array of isotopes that...
Oh, you're being censored,
Yeah,
Bret.
someone doesn't want to hear it. No, you create an array of isotopes that have these almost magical properties. I mean, these can be used to fight cancer. These can be used to detect cracks in steel structures. These can be used for batteries to send satellites into space. I mean, this is the most incredible resource that humanity has ever created. We need to start productizing the spent nuclear fuel, not characterizing it as a dangerous, hazardous material.
A lot of people are concerned about it, but I get your point. Let's turn it into a fuel that we can use in the future again. What needs to change in the United States in order for you to build your small modular nuclear reactors here?
Policy reform. You just got to cut through the red tape.
Again, you need a single window permitting
Clearance.
process. I like that a lot. Okay, now, Katerina, what has been the biggest change for SLB since you all changed your name and decided to kind of abandon the past and focus more on, the sustainability aspect of your business?
So first of all, we are not abandoning the past, but we are trying to make oil and gas as decarbonized as possible. We are trying to get the lowest carbon barrel because we will need it for a comparably long time. What has changed? I mean, I think what the industry is facing is the question: how do you decarbonize the traditional business while you are building up or using your capabilities to build up the energy system of the future? Mm-hmm. And I mean, one major point that we see that is very important for us is the whole topic of digital. And there are lots of capabilities in the industry on digital because the subsurface know-how and what the industry needed to know about what happens under the ground, 3-4 kilometers under the ground, led to big capabilities in digital a long time ago. And I think that's something that we are now using as an enabler for sustainability, if you want. So, because if we want to drive sustainability in the energy arena, the first thing that we need to get is transparency about where the emissions are happening. We need reporting, we need integrity, and integrity is really important because we need to be able to prove how we are reducing emissions.
Well, sure.
And then we need the optimal ways to get to lower emissions, and that's the whole decarbonization pathway story. And I think that's something that that is doing a lot of change to the industry and to our company.
The verification aspect of the data, that's very interesting to me, because you were talking earlier about carbon capture and sequestration.
Yes.
That's the idea. You're going to take the carbon dioxide and put it back down into the ground, perhaps even into the very same rock reservoirs that used to hold the oil and gas.
Yes.
But the question that I keep coming up against is, how do we know if it's going to stay there? What happens if it leaks out over time? So you're convinced that those problems can be solved?
You know what? They can be solved, and the technology is already there. So we can bring the carbon under the ground, and to be very clear about it, in every scenario that the World Energy Agency, the International Energy Agency is using, carbon capture is playing a major role. And even if we hit net zero, hopefully 2050 or whatever other time around it, after that, we will still need to have to bring enormous amounts of carbon under the ground to get back to the 300 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere that the planet had for a very long time. And I mean, the only way to really get carbon out of the system is bringing it under the ground. So I think this whole topic around carbon capture and storage, how we monitor it, how we, with transparency and integrity, can make clear what happens to the carbon and that nothing comes out again. That's a very, very important topic where the technology actually exists. And it's now a question of how do we get price down and how we get faster in implementing it, because one of the major problems in carbon capture and storage right now is that between basically the idea of the project and FID is like 3 to 5 years, and then it's another 3 years to do the construction of the project. So it's like an 8-year time frame, which is far too long. And a lot of that, again, is based on the very long term the permitting takes. That needs to get faster because the technology is there. We can do it now. We can bring carbon out of the atmosphere under the surface and keep it there as natural gas has been there. And for me, that's the largest scale short-term solution that we have.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, Bradford, you're the Executive Director of Clean Energy Solutions at NextEra Energy. What's the most exciting clean energy solution that you're focused on this year? What's something that the audience might not have heard about, but you think has a lot of potential, that not just scalable, but really significant?
Yeah, when we look at kind of the next 10 to 20 years, we're very much focused in green hydrogen. We're making a $20 billion bet over the next couple of years in green hydrogen and building out the infrastructure for that, but also wanting to bring down the cost.
$20 billion?
Yeah, $20 billion. And when you look at that market, the clean hydrogen market, Deloitte just projected that in 2030 it'll be a $642 billion market, and by 2050 it'll be a $1.4 trillion market with over 1 million to 2 million jobs on an annual basis.
And that's just green hydrogen?
No, that's clean hydrogen.
Clean hydrogen.
Clean hydrogen. Green hydrogen will be a part of that. The key thing that gets us excited on it is when we work with corporates and we're asking them, what keeps you up at night? And they're like, how do we address scope 1? Yeah. Right? How do we address our transportation fuels? How do we replace natural gas? How do we look at aviation fuel? Aviation fuels being 3% of global emissions. And that's where green hydrogen is going to come in to have offset some of those emissions. And we think that's going to be a big developer of low cost. You're going to need low cost renewables to do that, and you're going to need a decrease in technology prices, and that's what we're very much working on.
Okay, so you're primarily going to make hydrogen from running electrolyzers off of wind power?
Wind and solar.
Wind and solar.
Correct.
Okay, so using renewable energy to run the machines, to split the water, to take the hydrogen out of the water.
Correct.
You guys are a nuclear utility. How come you didn't mention nuclear there?
There you go.
Well, I think we are looking at SMRs as well, right? We've historically been a renewable developer. We also have a large nuclear fleet. We operate a ton of nuclear plants, and we are starting to look at SMRs and how we can incorporate them into our hydrogen strategy as well.
And what about large-scale nuclear? Why not build out a huge fleet of large-scale nuclear?
Well, right now we're very much just looking at the renewable front and how we can invest in that front. Then we'll eventually get to the nuclear.
So I think to Bret's point, you think, Bret, that nuclear should be included in the renewable energy discussion for sure, because it's the only proven, scalable, zero carbon source that we've already developed.
If what you care is about environmental impact, nothing even comes close. You're talking about 100-fold difference in raw material input, 100-fold difference in land consumption. If you actually care about the environment, it isn't an all of the above solution strategy. There is one answer, and that is nuclear power.
But it costs so much. Southern Power, they spent $30 billion
Exactly.
on these
That
fuels.
is the problem to solve.
Because it was too big, too complex,
Yep.
and that's why your solution is shrink it down to the smallest viable.
This is how we plan to solve environmental issues, air pollution, energy poverty, energy security. We are going to take the proven technology that already exists and make it manufacturable, just like we did with the automobile or with the airplane. And we are going to ride down those same cost curves that renewables have to orders of magnitude cost reduction to solve that one remaining problem that exists with nuclear. It costs too damn much.
Well, with that, you know what you guys have done? You've made me feel a little bit less depressed about our energy transition. So thank you for that. And I'm sure all working together, we'll solve this in no time. Thanks a lot.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.